My name is Susan Golubock, and I'm going to be presenting today on what autistic behaviors are telling us and how understanding them can help us actually get the behaviors we want without the ones we don't want. And I put here on the first slide a book that I would strongly recommend because it supports this approach of using brain science and understanding to help deal with challenging behaviors. It's called Beyond Behaviors. Research has shown us that autistic brains experience the same event that others do, but differently, which leads to very different responses, i.e., different behaviors. Anatomically, the brains look the same, yet research repeatedly talks about how the autistic brain functions, i.e., makes connections, inconsistently. For example, if this is the typical brain engaged in an activity of some kind that requires searching various areas of the brain, such as social interactions, the autistic brain can go way beyond. And all of a sudden, they're making way too many connections, and they don't know what to pay attention to, how to put that information together to make sense. So they're overwhelmed by it. On the other hand, if, say, for example, a typical person is drawing, so they're in the visual hemisphere, but they're also in the thinking area of the brain for planning what it is they want to do. So multiple areas of the brain will light up, whereas the autistic brain might only light up in the one area and not the other, which means they're trying to function on less information than the typical brain, as opposed to too much information. This is the inconsistency that research is seeing. To deal with these inconsistencies overall, autistics often crave predictability, rules, routines, but sometimes, inconsistently, we can be the opposite. Let's take a look. This is what you well know autistics seem to need and want. Rules, schedules, they want the predictability. But on the other hand, their response can go to one extreme or the other. You've got those kids, I'm sure, at home or in the classroom that get so rigid about rules and routines, they will not vary. And they insist everyone else has to follow exactly those same rules in the same way. And then on the other extreme, you've got those that, despite providing them with rules and schedules, etc., they can't seem to get it together. They cannot seem to follow a routine. This is what I'm talking about, the inconsistency, even when you try to provide them what they truly need. So how can you get them what they need and want, which is consistency in their lives, while still getting what you want, which is flexibility? First of all, you do want to provide the consistency using rules, routines, and schedules that they need to help them feel in some control of their lives. But I'm recommending it also, especially important, that it relates to time, because time is one of the biggest disruptors. Change, having to shift based on a clock, not when a task is done or not. And that can be very disruptive and difficult for an autistic to deal with, having to do on time. So we have to be able to predict when we have to stop and move on to the next thing. So we do need to understand about time. But when you schedule things on time, you want to provide some flexibility in that schedule, so that, hey, we've got a 15-minute gap here before we have to do the next activity. What would you like to do? Give them some choices, but help them plan. Well, now, wait a minute, you make that choice. You think you can be done with it in 15 minutes. Have them explore about how long it takes to do certain things when they make those choices. That's going to help them feel a lot more comfortable dealing with time. And I know I've mentioned this before, have them expect the unexpected. Make sure that at least once a day, something goes wrong or there's a change in the schedule. And you blame it on, oh, I forgot about that. Or, oh, darn, I made a mistake. We're going to have to stop and figure it out. So we're going to have, and this is what I want you to do then, is help them problem solve. If they are not able to engage in problem solving with you, you do the problem solving out loud, step by step, saying, okay, this is what happened. Here's the problem. Here's my choices. And if I choose this, here's probably the result that's going to happen. If I choose that, it might come out this way. Maybe I'll get it done faster if I choose this one. Think it all out loud so that they can understand that you're solving a problem, and then allow them to choose the solution. And if they can't choose, then you choose for them. And then you might even choose badly. And so, oh, that didn't work. I didn't like that result. Let's try another way. Work through that on a regular daily basis so they get used to being able to handle the unexpected, knowing that they can handle it and problems that occur can be fixed. To compensate for their brains being inconsistently over or understimulated, which impacts tremendously on their ability to attend to a task. Autistics tend to avoid situations if there's too much stimulation. Otherwise, they're going to shut down or they're going to protest. That's too much. When you see that kind of behavior where they're shutting down or protesting, then you know they're probably overwhelmed and they need the opposite. Whereas autistics can often, when they do shut down, they may have difficulty coming back and saying, oh, well, what's going on? Oh, I don't see it. So I create, because they're not getting enough stimulation, enough to sustain their attention. So they're going to seek additional input. So what can you give them that they need and you want, which is a balanced state that's calm yet alert? Start with helping them rebalance. When you see they're out of balance, they're showing the behaviors I just showed you, provide them with either more stimulation, if that's what they're saying they need, either in the environment itself or in the activity that you're doing. Make it more fun, more exciting, more dramatic in your approach to them. You may have to be more dramatic in order to grab and keep their attention. For those that are easily overwhelmed by too much, you need to provide them with a less stimulating environment or less expectations on the task you're doing, or even among yourself, a quieter tone of voice, slower tone of voice, less stimulation will help them, prevent them from rejecting because they can't handle it. To compensate for inconsistencies in being able to make connections between the two sides of the brain, autistics often learn to function in one side or the other, which creates problems. The left side of the brain tends to be the orderly, logical side of the brain. It picks up and attends to the details. It is focused a lot on written language. At least reading it doesn't mean they understand it, because that's the other side. But at least they may read early. They can do computations when it comes to math. But it's the right hemisphere that can see the big picture, looks at things visually, and understands and seeks patterns in what they see, which means they're recognizing things other people don't even see or talk about. It's the more emotional part of the brain. It's the more creative side of the brain for arts and music. Ideally, the typical brain is able to read, break down words, and then shift to the right brain to understand what they read, to put it all together. They're able to bring details and then decide how they can put those into a big picture. But if shifting between the two sides of the brain is inconsistent, many autistics, and you will see a very dominantly left brain approach to learning and a very dominantly right brain approach to learning. And you may have to adapt to the way they learn best. Let's look at how you could help them be able to recognize that there are two ways of looking at things. You always want to present that there are both sides, i.e., here, I'm going to show you how to lay out the steps for solving this problem. And let's look at the pattern of how the most important thing is the minus symbol or the plus symbol, so that when we're looking at, we want to catch that. Because if we don't, we're going to start computing it using the same methods, and we're going to get the wrong answer because we're working on a subtraction rather than a additional problem. So you want them to be able to notice both of those, and you want to point that out when they are being very organized and orderly, which is great for sequencing things. But there are times you want to present them with the fact that sometimes, hey, there's something interesting about chaos. Just doing whatever you feel like doing. You can introduce them to each of these aspects. They love talking about the details, especially their special interests, but then show them how they can actually take this information, put it together into a big picture. The important thing is, once you've introduced them and made them aware that there's another side, always let them decide when they're going to learn which side they do best. So if they can come up with the correct answer without going through the steps of a math problem, don't make them go back and show you the process. That's painful. They have to shift over to see it, and that's the less strong side of the brain. There are so many other inconsistencies that I can talk about with recommendations. I'll point them out, but this is just an introductory to the topic right now. Holding on to or recalling things from memory is inconsistent in autistics. Understanding what they read or heard, they may hear it, they may read it, but that doesn't mean they understand it. That can be inconsistent. Experiencing an emotion and then expressing what they're feeling can be very inconsistent. Doing an action on command, they can do it spontaneously, but you ask them to say smile on command, and they're going to look at you like, what's that? How do I do that? They can do it. The brain inconsistently doesn't make the connection that tells them how to do it on command. Prioritizing what's important or unimportant to pay attention to is inconsistent. Giving eye contact and listening at the same time. Just because they're not giving eye contact doesn't mean they're not telling the truth or they're not listening. You have to realize when you're analyzing their behaviors, you can't interpret these behaviors from your perspective. You have to be able to look at it from the autistic perspective. Awareness of self and others during social interactions is a huge inconsistent area that often gets them in trouble and is very frustrating for autistics. So, in response to all this inconsistently, what choices do autistics realistically have? in terms of how they're going to respond. Well, you're going to get those that are going to really want to try, but they're also going to be very anxious because they're afraid if they fail. And this is what's going to happen when they do fail. They'll go into a meltdown or a shutdown because they failed and they're so afraid of failure. Then you have the dependent pleaser who has no thoughts of their own. They simply follow everything you tell them to do because they want to please you. But then this is hard work. And they may not be getting anything out of what they're learning. They're just doing it to please you. And then when they don't understand why that's not good enough, you still expect more, they're burnt out. They're ready to give up. Then you have the defiantly independent autistic who said, look, the help you try to give me doesn't work. I need to do it my way. It's my way or the highway. And unfortunately, this is going to lead to where they feel frustrated to the point of aggressing toward themselves or toward others. You've seen all of these behaviors, and they can fluctuate. The same individual can be first one way and then another way. All of these are coping strategies. They're trying to deal with expectations being made that they can't consistently meet. In order to cope with stress and anxiety, autistics often stim. And I know this has a negative connotation and is often encouraged to get rid of it. But let's talk a little bit about stimming. You know what it looks like. But if you tell them to not stim, more often than not, this is what you're going to get. Meltdowns, aggressions, shutdowns. You're going to get the behaviors you don't want. Why? Because stimming is a way that autistics self-calm. Typical people stim when they're stressed. Foot tap, pen click, hair twirling, nail biting. And do they get upset when they are stressed? Yes, they have meltdowns, shutdowns, aggression toward self, and aggression toward others. So let's recognize it for what it is. When someone starts to stim, that behavior is telling us, I am stressed. You need, at this point, to not stop me from de-stressing or find a better way for me to de-stress. I went to Wikipedia because I was observing an individual who was stimming, and I said, oh my gosh, that is the same thing as meditation. It serves the same purpose. So I looked it up, the two of them separately, and I compared them. The goal is actually the same. The goal is to relieve anxiety or establish an emotionally calm and stable state. The methods are basically the same. Repetition of movements, sounds, or words for stimming, and meditation, you repeat sounds or words, i.e. a mantra, to help you stay focused in the moment. The purpose is to block out all of those negative thoughts of the past or the future or whatever else is going on and focus on the now. That's what stimming does. They are so focused on the object that they're moving or their hand movements. They're focused on trying to calm down, the same as meditation. It's a form of mindfulness. So think about this the next time you try to discourage them because, oh, that stimming is getting in the way of you functioning. They can't function until they can calm down. Recognize, oh, you need a break. You need some time to calm yourself. And then work with them. Can you help anyone who's expressing nonverbally that they're anxious or stressed? Yes. Stop what you're doing, remove them from the situation, hopefully to a safe place where they feel comfortable and safe to allow them to calm down. When they're ready, and you're going to ask them, are you ready now? When they seem to be calm, help them identify what built up to or triggered their stress or anxiety response. And for those who are nonverbal and unable to answer you, you're going to have to do the guessing. Well, let me think back at the situation. What was going on? What have I observed prior to this that may be leading up to the stress? And this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. You're going to have to think through that aloud so they can hear you thinking, and they will be learning from you how to think. Then, once you identify the problem, the underlying issues, then you can come up with some solutions for how you might be able to either avoid that buildup of situations that triggered it, or increase the amount of supports that they get to keep them from being overstressed or over anxious. So, in conclusion, do autistic people's brains actually work harder than most people because of these differences? A resounding yes. Research has shown that when they did functional MRIs with individuals and suggested that they rest, and I experienced this, it actually took effort and attention on their part to do it. My first thought when they said, now rest, just rest, and don't fall asleep, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm laying here doing nothing in an MRI machine already. If I relax anymore, how am I going to prevent myself from falling asleep? And then I became very anxious about, well, how am I going to deal with this? I don't get it. So no, it is very frustrating. And I'm going to conclude with, if you want to know more about this topic, we certainly invite you to contact us at Making Sense of Autism relative to a specific individual and concerns that you may have. Would be happy to walk you through it. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.